Hello, good evening. Welcome to the fourth in our series of Alpine Club casts. Tonight we're talking about the 4,000 metre peaks of the Alps and 3 ridges to remember. The last guidebook the Alpine Club produced was the late Martin Moran's The 4,000 metre peaks of the Alps. This book is fantastic. As Martin wrote in the introduction, the Alps remain the most accessible and immediately rewarding range of high mountains in the world. Tonight we're focusing on just 3 routes, and we've deliberately chosen 3 speakers who are members of the Alpine Club, all with a passion for climbing in the Alps, and each with very different backgrounds. All have climbed throughout the world. Paul Newby joined the Alpine Club in 1970 and managed to combine climbing and adventure trips with a busy career as a land surveyor in UK government service, both overseas and at the Ordnance Survey. Max Streeton joined the club in 2013 after he met Mike Pinney on an Alpine Club meet in 2013. Max is a semi-retired engineer working occasionally as an outdoor instructor. And then finally tonight, Becky Coles, a mountaineering and climbing instructor and expedition leader. And Becky is part of Project Alpine Spirit, which is attempting to be the first all-women team to climb all the 4,000ers. So tonight we'll hear about some of their favourite routes. And this map shows you where the 3 ridges are that we're talking about. We're going to work south to north, starting on the Italian-Swiss border with the Dufourspitze. And Paul Newby. Are you there, Paul?
Yes, thank you very much, Nick. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Paul Newby speaking to you from darkest South Hampshire, though I'd much rather be at my home in North Wales. As Nick said, I was lucky enough to join the AC very young on the back of my expeditions to Turkey and Afghanistan in the mid-1960s. I won't dwell on the intervening years, but as part of my 70th birthday treat in 2014, I returned to the Alps after a lengthy enforced absence. To improve my chances of a good comeback, and aiming to complete some unfinished business from my misspent middle age, I hired my old friend Rob Collister in his official capacity of mountain guide. Those who were there will remember that the summer of 2014 and the first 2 weeks of July in particular broke 150 years worth of Météo Suisse records for lack of sunshine and for high rainfall. Thanks to Rob's local knowledge and skill, we did salvage quite a bit from the wreckage. After I spotted a tiny weather window forecast for the morning of our very last day, we managed a route that could easily have featured as one of tonight's favourite ridges. However, I didn't return home satisfied as I'd hoped from what was supposed to be my swan song as well as my comeback. So in 2018, I was ready to try again. By now, Rob had formally retired, so this time he joined me as ancien guide rather than merely vieux guide. We again made a slow start for various reasons, but we climbed some lovely minor peaks, and we actually met Becky quite by chance on top of one of them. In the second week, we got into our stride, and the weather also looked set fair for at least a couple of days before the end of our trip. We agreed to go for my top item of unfinished business, Monte Rosa, on which I'd been thwarted by bad weather many years earlier. At over 4,600 meters, it's the highest mountain in Switzerland and the second highest in the Alps. We caught the midday Gornergrat train from Zermatt up to Rotenboden, where the path to the Monte Rosa hut begins. Leaving the train, one sees immediately that Monte Rosa is a very large mountain, rather a long way away. The highest peak, Dufourspitze, is in the middle. I'm pointing, but you won't see very much, I think, with the small cursor size. Off to the left is Nordend, and all the other peaks of the Monte Rosa range are hidden behind. On the right is Liskam, a bit lower, but much nearer. Another strong candidate for a favourite ridge for anybody daring to take photos while teetering along it. Now, long ago, tourists used to stroll across the glaciers for lunch at the hut over there, just right of centre, and back again in the afternoon. Climate change and glacier retreat have ensured that now only tourists with helicopters can do this. Without a helicopter, we took 3¾ hours of grievous slog over very difficult ground with over 2,200 feet of both ascent and descent to reach the hut. It isn't particularly high. At under 2,900 meters, it's only about 70 meters above the railway station, and it leaves a full 6,000 feet for the climb to the summit next day. On this long telephoto shot, one can just about spot quite a lot of tomorrow's well-trodden route, just to the left of my red line, up the Monte Rosa glacier to the saddle, where the West Ridge begins properly. Guillaume-Henri Dufour was the great mid-19th century Swiss surveyor and cartographer who set Swiss mapping on the path of excellence which we still see today. So in a sense, this is Switzerland's own Mount Everest. And to my mind, Dufourspitze sounds so much better than Gornerhorn, which was its name until 1863. Now you can see the ground we've got to cross to get to the hut, right down there and back up again. Becky's told me that in 2019, a new and improved path was devised, so we may have unluckily done it at its very worst. Here Rob's descending the ladders where the ice used to be. We were very glad of this steel bridge over the worst of the meltwater streams, but apart from the ladders themselves, that was the only artificial aid on the way to the hut. Here we're looking back to another party descending the ladders and descending towards the ladders. We'll draw a veil over our next couple of hours. When you get there, the new hut, which was opened in 2009, is rather bleak, despite the relatively low altitude. It's a space-age metallic construction on the outside, but warm and traditionally wooden inside. We followed the Guardian's protocol and got up for a 3 a.m. breakfast. We were on our way before 3:45 in pitch black and overcast with no stars at all. I'll spare you my very few photos in the dark, but after a couple of hours of boulders, gravel, slabs and steep neve, we were well on our way up the open glacier on an increasingly beautiful but very cold morning with 2 parties ahead of us and several more behind. The saddle we're aiming for is only just to the left of the big black crag. Also behind us, the Breithorn, the Dent d'Errance and the Matterhorn had all now come miraculously clear. Eventually the trail curves round to the right and goes up more steeply to the saddle on the West Ridge. This picture shows the ridge quite well, with steep snow above the saddle, then some relatively level but knife-edged snow, arête with sections of scrambling and mixed ground, which I found airy and quite awkward in parts, with hints of the tricky final rock sections towards the summit. The saddle, we've already gained about 80% of the height from the hut to the summit, but all the technical difficulty is yet to come. I didn't get any photos here on the way up, so this is a shot from our descent, looking up the steep snowy ridge from the saddle towards other parties coming down, and the summit is somewhere behind here. Here I've taken advantage of a kink in the ridge and spotted the spindrift of early parties coming from the other side of the mountain. The summit's still quite a long way off, hidden behind the final snow rise here. We reached the very cramped and cold and quite windy summit block in just over 5.5 hours from the hut. I was lucky to capture this fellow coming over the foresummit from the other side, with rather ominous clouds gathering over Italy. To me, a much more pleasant and snowy aspect is looking southeast to the signal kuppe with the Margherita hut on the top. I retreated from there in a whiteout after a hairy and airy Listcam traverse in September 2000. Rob and I swiftly swallowed some lunch and set off down without delay. Although only graded PD+, in his guidebook, Martin Moran described the route as a whole as interesting and challenging, and the main arête as exciting and exposed. I agreed with him on the way up, and I may have momentarily used rather stronger language on the descent. However, as the perfect friend, Rob was reassuringly polite about my performance. It was a massive relief to reach the saddle and to know that it should be plain sailing from here on, although still a long way home down the glacier. We had a second lunch at the saddle And I think I should be allowed just one photo of myself, looking pleased at last. What seemed like hours later, still in fine weather on this side of the Alps, the hut came into view. You can see very well where the ice used to be, as well as a little green lake down to the right below the hut. Yes, where the ice used to be between here and Zermatt. We knew we had only to deal with a bit more soft snow and gravel and boulders and slabs. We were looking forward to solving the eternal problem of the correct order in which to drink tea and beer and tea and wine and tea and beer and wine and tea. We were on the hill just a few minutes under 10 hours, which I understood was a perfectly respectable time for anybody, never mind two men both well into our 70s. We weren't greedy on the wine at dinner. We regretted that later when we got our bill and learned of a very nice tradition whereby wine is on the house for those who stay over at the hut after summiting the Dufourspitze. That in itself would be an excellent reason for not going back to Zermatt the same day. The other reason is, of course, the atrocious hut walk. Didn't seem any easier nor much quicker next day. Rob is making his way through the chaos above the confluence of the Grenzgletscher and the Gornergletscher. The scenery is great if you dare to take your eyes off your footing. Finally, one can start to relax and enjoy what one has achieved. I think I really might be satisfied this time, and I may not need to go back. Thank you very much, Rob. And if you're watching, thank you, Henry and Stuart and Tim and Tom. And I would thank Martin Moran and Paul Farmer too, who helped at different times. I'm going to hand over now to Max Streeton for some rather sterner stuff climbed by a slightly younger man. Are you there, Max?
Hi, yeah. Yes, I'm here. Thanks, Paul. Welcome to Southampton. We've only moved 10 miles away now from Paul. For the route, though, we're moving, well, not far again, actually, just over to the west side of the Zermatt Valley. I'm going to talk about a route I did on the Weisshorn. I think, as Nick said, this was during the 2013 Alpine Club meet. Actually, my first year as an Alpine Club member, but actually my second Alpine Club meet. I was out there actually before the meet and had the pleasure with Mike Pinney on what was sadly his last summer Alpine meet. He's someone who knows how to pick some, interesting routes. We did a fantastic traverse of the Lauteraarhorn, up the Rockgrat and down the North Ridge, finishing in a thunderstorm. We also did a traverse of the Nadelgrat, which I have to say is not the most pleasant of routes, but still interesting. After that, I met up with a friend of mine, Frodel Stickle, from the local Wessex Mountaineering Club. As you know, Hampshire is clearly a mountaineering centre, having a local mountaineering club. We kept this theme with traverses. We did a great traverse of the Laginhorn in snowy conditions, and a very enjoyable and relaxed traverse for a group of us on the Weisshorn. We're getting towards the end of our trip, but we had a fantastic weather window. The forecast was blue skies, no wind, no thunderstorms for the next few days, and then turning a bit mixed after that. So we thought, well, we need to get a big route in, and so we looked around. My trusty Valleys East guidebook, I think dates from 1999, described the Schaligrat as an excellent climb on sound rock in a wonderful setting, and said you're likely to have it to yourself. Well, that sounded pretty good. So the route shown on here, it's not my photo, it's a stock one. The Schaligrat on the left there, going up from the Schaligrat, where there's a bivvy hut, up to the summit. We would really love to have done a full traverse down the North Ridge, which is on the right there, over the Bischhorn. That would have been really long and bring us back to the wrong valley. The other option was the normal route, East Ridge, shown with the red dots there. So we decided to keep our options open. We decided not to make a decision until we got to the summit. The route here on the map. We first go up from Zermatt to the Rothorn hut down the bottom there. Then you spend a day going up and traversing the Schalighorn to get to the Schalijoch and the bivouac hut. And then the next day up the Weisshorn to summit and down by one or other routes as yet to be decided. Okay, so first day, or first climbing day. First climbing day, we this is the Zeno Rotthorn hut, the day we walked up. So the next morning, we left there early with all the crowds of people, as you normally get leaving these huts. But we're fairly pleased to find out that they were all heading for the Zeno Rotthorn, and it wasn't long before we were heading off in a different direction. In this photo, you can see the ridge in the background. We came over into this bowl, and we're now heading up the flanks onto the Schalighorn. Schalighorn itself, I must say, is not a great mountain. It's only 25 meters short of being a 4,000 meter peak. So add 25 meters and I'm sure it'd be very popular. As you can see here, it's not the best of rock. Bit loose. It's got a few interesting bits on it. It gets AD as a climbing grade. But really it was a means to an end. It's a way to get to the bivouac hut on the Schalijoch. The summit of the Schalighorn, however, gave a fantastic view. Here, looking across at the Schaligrat and the Weisshorn, as you can see, it looks like a nice straight ridge, just cut near the top by a couloir. My trusty old Valais East guidebook describes the whole route in about 4 sentences. I think the newer guidebook describes it in about 4 pages. Quite sure how complex it's going to be. Anyway, it's only about 200 meters down from the summit there, down to the hut. So here's down the hut. We were there, I don't know, mid-afternoon probably, a good time. It's a fairly small hut. It sleeps 8 people. There's probably room for about 2 or 3 people to stand up at the same time. So we're pretty pleased that we had the hut to ourselves. And of course, that also meant we would have the route to ourselves the next day. So got there in good time. So the route starts up on a bit of easy ground before you join the ridge, not for long, probably half an hour. So I walked up there in the evening just to check it out, and really enjoy an evening. It was really great having that solitude and watching the sun setting. Okay, the next morning we set off to do the climb itself. We didn't start too early because we knew we'd be climbing quite soon on the rock and it would be cold. The hut is just below 3,800 meters, so already pretty high up. Be honest, we didn't get away as early as we planned, and are conscious the whole day really that this route was taking quite a while. The guidebook gives it a 5 to 7 hours time. It's over 755 meters of ascent, most of which is rock climbing and sustained, it says in the guidebook. This is probably why I haven't got too many photos of the route itself. We are busy climbing. This is fairly high up on the ridge. As you can see, a stunning day, great views. And most of the route is rock. There's a few snow bits higher up, but it's basically a rock climb, or it certainly was in the conditions we had. It's south facing, so it gets plenty of sun. This is Frodo coming up to join me on the summit. As I said, took us quite a long time, and we didn't actually get to the summit until about 4 p.m, which is obviously quite late in the day for getting to a summit on a high peak. It did have an advantage though. It meant all those people who I presume had come up from up the normal route that day, I'm sure there would have been lots of them on a nice day, had all been and gone. So we got to the summit having seen nobody and with nobody else there. We should have really got a move on at this point. However, my friend Frodo can't go far without coffee, so we had a brew on the summit. He'd done this on all the other summits as well, and I think he has maybe a long-term plan to be possibly the first person to have a fresh cup of coffee on each 4,000 meter peak. Quite a few to go though. So it was, well, I don't know, 4:30 probably by the time we thought about going down. That made the choice really simple. Doing the full traverse on the North Ridge really would have just been too long, particularly on soft snow late in the day. So we decided to head down the normal route, the East Ridge. It gets AD in the guidebook. Reasonably straightforward, certainly easy route finding. This is just leaving the summit. There's rock sections and snow sections. This is one of the longer snow sections you can see here. I think we moved together on the whole route, no abseiling or anything, but it's still a long way and took quite a while. And as I said, we started quite late. This is most of the way down, the sun began to set. We did, luckily, just get off the route, off the ridge before it got dark, onto the glacier below. We still had to get down the sort of rock edges back to the hut. And the guidebook says you take a couloir easily visible from the hut. It's not, however, easily visible from above in the dark. So we had a little trouble finding that. We did meet two people, the first people we've seen since leaving the hut the day before. Two Italians who had done the normal route. They must have been going quite slow. But we thought they can tell us the way down. Unfortunately, they said they couldn't remember. Anyway, we found an alternative route heading down a bit lower and going back up, but this all took more time, and we arrived at the Weisshorn hut about 11 o'clock at night. All dark, no sign of anyone. And of course, we hadn't booked because we hadn't planned necessarily to go that way. You could try and find somewhere to sleep, but we're going to get woken up in a few hours by even getting up anyway. So we felt good, so we just carried on down. This route had a good advantage because the footpath comes out literally opposite the campsite we were staying in. So we just kept going and rolled into the campsite about, I think it was about 2 a.m. by the time we got back. Again, a late finish. It did have, however, had a benefit again, being a bit late. It's been a hot day, but of course it'd been cold for a while in the evening, which meant our beer had cooled down nicely. So we got back, chilled out in the campsite, had a few beers before retiring for the night. So a fantastic route. As I said, the weather forecast was not great after that. So as our last big route, we did enjoy ourselves for the last few days. Did a nice via ferrata up above Zermatt, which we started too late and got caught in a thunderstorm. And we even did a little bit of local bouldering. Here we are. So you could mountaineering bouldering. These boulders, by the way, conveniently had only just arrived. During a big storm, a few new boulders arrived just near the campsite. Okay, well, thanks for listening. Hope that's inspired a few people to maybe go and try that route. And I'd like to hand you over now to Becky Coles up in the far north. Are you there, Becky?
Thank you very much, Max. And hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from North Wales this evening. And now I'm going to take you to the Bernese Oberland. So last year, I went and climbed the Schreckhorn and Lauteraarhorn. And this was part of a much bigger alpine trip. We were a team of women climbing all the alpine 4,000 metre peaks, as Nick has mentioned. And no all-women's team has climbed any list of 4,000 metre peaks over any amount of time. And last year we climbed 56 of the peaks on the UIAA list of 82 peaks. So here's a map of the Bernese Oberland, and I've circled the most famous mountain there, the Eiger, and can see that the Schreckhorn and Lauteraarhorn are just to the east of the Eiger. Now, when researching all the 4,000 metre peaks, we knew that a lot of the 4,000ers on the south side of Mont Blanc would be tricky, but some people had told us that also the Schreckhorn and Lauteraarhorn were going to be quite tricky ones. And I have to admit that I really didn't know much about them at all before researching them more and realising that yes, they were going to be quite hard. So I'll just take you to another peak, the Finsteraarhorn. Now that's the highest mountain in the Bernese Oberland, and we actually went and climbed the Finsteraarhorn in the middle of June last year, and it was still really snowy in the Oberland then, and we were getting about on skis. It was lovely actually, because it was dead quiet and we could stay in the winter rooms. And we skied over to the Finsteraarhorn here, and went and climbed the northwest ridge, which is the ridge on the left-hand side of the peak there. Now, why I'm mentioning that is that because from the northwest peak, you get fantastic views over to the Schreckhorn and Lauteraarhorn. And you can see I've annotated the photo a bit there. The hut is down and kind of still out of view, obscured by the shoulder there of the Finsteraarhorn. And then the left-hand arrow, that's the southwest ridge of the Schreckhorn, leading up to the summit of the Schreckhorn. And then the right-hand arrow, that's the Lauteraargrat, leading to the summit of the Lauteraarhorn. Now, the Lauteraarhorn is known as one of the most remote 4,000 metre peaks in the Alps. And that's because if you come in from the east, it's actually a 20-kilometre walk in. We were going to come in from Grindelwald to the Schreckhorn hut there, and then it's a big 1,000-metre ascent to get to the base of the southwest ridge of the Schreckhorn, and then 600-metre route on the Schreckhorn before going across to the Lauteraargrat. Another route of note that might be of interest on the Lauteraarhorn, if you can see that big wide snowy couloir to the right of the Lauteraarhorn summit, that's the south face couloir that's mentioned in the Ben Tibbetts book on the excellent new book on 4,000 metre peaks, and that's the route he climbs to Lauteraarhorn. So that might be of interest. Now, those were not the conditions to be climbing the Schreckhorn and Lauteraarhorn on the routes we wanted to do. It was way too snowy. We needed the rock to be clear of snow. And so it was not till much later in the season that we returned to the Oberland and to Grindelwald. We'd rung the hut guardian kind of multiple times through the summer, but he'd always said, no, there's still snow on the ridge. It's not the right time to climb it. So it wasn't till the 26th of August, we headed back to Grindelwald, having heard there were good conditions now on the Lauteraargrat. We took this very quaint cable car. It only gives you about 400 metres of ascent to get to the trail to walk into the Schreckhorn hut. It's about 4 to 5 hour walk in, and it's really pleasant. You've got the Eiger up to your right and you're looking straight up the Metalligi Integral, so really spectacular views. Now, a presentation of going to Switzerland wouldn't be complete without some Edelweiss, but it was notable. This was the only Edelweiss we actually saw in the wild whilst we did all our peaks in Switzerland. So that was of particular note. The Schreckhorn hut is fantastically positioned. The summit of the Schreckhorn is just there to the right of the Swiss flag, and then on the other side is the Lauteraargrat leading up to the Lauteraarhorn there. So Schreck means fear or terror, but I don't think the mountain is as terrifying as the hut guardian in the Schreckhorn hut. So when we arrived, we went to speak to him, and the first thing he told us was, you can't climb the Schreckhorn. And we were quite confused, and we said, well, we thought it was good conditions, you know, why is it not possible? He said, you can't climb it as a 3, because we were a team of 3. And we climbed about 50 4,000 metre, over 50 4,000 metre peaks by this stage of the summer. And so I thought maybe I'd try reasoning with him, and maybe I'd try and impress him even with some of the other routes we've climbed. For example, the Aiguille de Diable, which takes in 6 4,000 metre peaks and is technical climbing over these jaggedy rock spires on the Italian side of, or the south side of Mont Blanc. Anyway, his response to that was, that is not a mountain, the Schreckhorn is a mountain. So anyway, the next day we headed off up the southwest ridge of the Schreckhorn, and it is superb rock on the route. Really good, excellent rock, and really enjoyable climbing. And yeah, we had a great time on that climb.
So we're on the Schreckhorn. It is 6:30 in the morning. Summit of the Schreckhorn is up there, and we're making really good progress. So pretty pleased with the time we've taken to get here. But after the Schreckhorn, we want to go all the way along there to over there. So still a lot to do. It's going to be a long day.
We got to the summit of the Schreckhorn here, looking back towards it, and we got there in good time, but we looked down the east-southeast ridge that we'd have to descend to get onto the Lauteraargrat, and we saw that we might have a problem. There looked like quite a lot of snow on the route, and we knew that it would just be really slow to try and climb it in snowy conditions. Combined with that, we also just watched a helicopter come in and long line rescue a guide and a client that were ahead. So we were slightly concerned with these two factors, but we kind of made a decision to carry on for a bit and see whether the snow continued or not. We put on crampons actually, but we soon took them off and were on dry rock and there were really good conditions. So another route that might be of interest to people is if you look along the ridge here and to the left, there's a big buttress of rock that's half in sunlight, half in shadow. That's the South Pillar, again mentioned in the Ben Tibbetts book. And if you're climbing the Schreckhorn and you wanted to go up and down a different route rather than up and down the southwest ridge, the South Pillar is supposed to be excellent climbing. That takes you to the top of the Schreckhorn there, and then you can descend the southwest ridge. We're now on the Lauteraargrat, and that continues along over a lot of gendarmes, and you can't bypass them at all. It's really time-consuming climbing, going up and down, up and down. And this is about the crux of the route here. The rock quality deteriorates a bit towards the summit of the Lauteraargrat, but it's never terrible. We certainly climbed a lot worse quality rock during the summer in the Alps last year. Now the Lauteraargrat is notable on a few points. One of which, well, it was first climbed in 1902. And interestingly, it was climbed on the same day by two parties going in opposite directions. But even more uniquely for the period was that both of those parties had top female climbers leading them. Helena Kutz in one party and Gertrude Bell in the other party. So that was of particular interest to us. So we got to the summit of the Lauteraarhorn, actually in the light, and started to make the descent. Now, the descent in the Martin Moran book actually is not mentioned as a particularly nice descent. And I think he did it on his big enchainment of the Alps and doesn't speak well of it. But actually it's much improved. A couple of years ago, they put some staples in over the kind of nasty bit. And we got some excellent beta on the descent from a friend who'd done it the previous week. So we followed his directions to the letter that took us down to the staples, and we got down through those in the light. And then before it got dark, and we had the long trudge out to the Schreckhorn hut, having missed dinner and well into the night, but thoroughly exhilarated and chuffed with ourselves that we'd done the route, and really enjoyed ourselves on the route. So I would thoroughly recommend it to anyone that wants to climb a longer route in the Alps and likes climbing at that difficile plus grade. Yeah, really great route, and definitely nice to go somewhere different from the Chamonix area. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. I'm now going to hand back to Nick. Are you there, Nick?
I am indeed. Yes, thank you, Becky. Wonderful. And thanks to Max and Paul as well. Really interesting. So, folks, we've now got about 15 minutes of questions. So if you do have a question, do switch on your video and go with your mouse to the bottom of your screen, click on participants, and at the bottom of that screen, you'll see the option to raise a hand. Oh, I can see there's a question coming in already from Derek. So yes, Derek, are you there? Go ahead.
I am here, yes. I suppose I've got a question really for Max. On the 150th anniversary of the first ascent of the Weisshorn, Dave Wynne-Jones and I were going to go from the Weisshorn hut up to the Schaligrat and do the Schaligrat route that you did. And of course that is defined in Martin Moran's book as a viable route. When we got there, of course, the Guardian laughed at us and said, nobody does that anymore. And he said, look at it. And of course, the route from the Weisshorn hut is actually no longer viable. Instead of being a nice snowy couloir, is actually a trossy rock couloir, which is very dangerous. So you obviously went the right way, but we were planning to be part of the group. So we actually ended up trying this normal east route, the East Ridge, which we failed on, as it turned out, because of bad weather. But we went back subsequently and did it with Nick King.
Hi, Derek.
Hello, Max.
Yeah, was there actually a question there?
Well, it wasn't really a question, was it? It was a comment.
That's what I thought, yeah. Certainly, I remember seeing the guidebook said you could get to the Schaligrat hut. Well, you could descend from the Schaligrat hut down the glacier, but it suggested that as an undesirable option, but as an escape route in bad weather if you really had to. So, so yeah, certainly I think it seemed that the best way was over the Schreckhorn, and also we had a few good days weather windows, so it seemed nice to link the two together and make a real journey out of it. Yeah,
that's what we wanted to do.
Oh well, we have to go back. It's not often you get to do a lovely ridge on a 4,000 metre peak and have the whole place to yourself. I mean, we didn't really basically see anyone since leaving the hut. Well, other than the two Italians on the way down, we had basically 2 days when we didn't see anyone else. And yeah, that's a rare privilege in the Alps.
Another time, maybe.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks for that, and Max. I think we've got Charlie Burbage, have we? Charlie, are you there?
Nick here, it's Charlie here. It's a question for Becky, really. It's quite frivolous. For complicated reasons, I was having to read through the 1927 Alpine Journal today, and in doing so, I discovered that there's a strong tradition in the Alpine Club of all women ascents of tremendous mountains, which you walk as first ascent to the Matterhorn and so on and so forth. But at the time, they were known as man-free ascents. I was wondering whether Becky would be willing to change the name of her expedition from all women to man-free in line with Alpine Club tradition.
Yeah, I'm very open to that. Yeah, no problem at all.
Thanks, Charlie. I think that was a yes. Okay, is Chris Bedford there?
Hi.
Hi. Actually, the
Question's
question
from Liz. Liz is going to ask the question.
And it's along the same lines because, you know, obviously having done the 4,000 metre peaks, I've climbed both all female groups and all male groups. And I wondered how Becky thought gender was relevant and whether or not the experience differed for her between climbing with women and climbing with men.
I think it's just personality driven rather than gender driven, how an experience is going out in the mountains in climbing. I certainly kind of haven't noticed before, like I don't really notice, you know, men or women climbing in the mountains, but this project did did definitely kind of highlight to me that actually there were really few all women's teams about. We certainly saw women in mixed groups and couples, but I think because I was noticing these things all of a sudden, I saw about 8 all women's teams all summer. So that was quite interesting. And they were mainly in the Chamonix area as well. So I don't know if that completely answers your question really, but yeah, I think it's quite personality driven.
Yeah, but I mean, there are many more women climbing together, I think, now, which is fantastic. You know, when I started climbing 4,000 metre peaks in the early 90s, we were a very rare breed, same gender groups. But I guess I didn't really feel, for me, gender came into who I climbed with. So it's just different people, as you say, different people, different ways.
Thanks, Liz. That's great. Actually, I've got a question myself, just while anyone else is thinking of a question. It's a question for Paul. You said that at the Monte Rosa hut that the wine was free. I just wondered if it was any good.
Well, that's a good question. I think it definitely was okay. I can't remember if they had the wine I usually like to choose in Swiss huts on grounds of low cost and high quality, which is Goron, which is made from the same 2 grapes as the famous Dole that everybody tends to buy. The Dole has allegedly the best of the Pinot Noir and Gamay grapes, and all the rubbish goes into Goron, but I've found that the makers tend to put much more care into making Goron, and so it tends to be extremely good value. And in fact, Susan and I are going to share a bottle this evening when this is all over. So the wine in the hut was definitely okay. Yes.
Brilliant. Good to know.
Oh, I'll chip in on while we're talking about hut alcohol. I can also recommend the Promontoire hut on the Mage. And they give you alcohol the day before you do the climb, which maybe isn't recommended, but.
Actually, I've got another question because there aren't any more coming in, which is for Becky. I've been planning to have a go at that ridge myself for a number of years, and I think when I last looked at planning it, we thought perhaps we would bivvy, because it is a very long route, isn't it? And obviously, I'm probably not as quick as you are, even though you're a 3 as well. Any tips on whether have you bivvied much over your 56 routes last year?
Well, we bivvied a bit, yeah. I don't know if the normal tactics on that route are to bivvy at all, there were some bivvy sites higher up actually before you're getting onto the southwest ridge. So yeah, you could get up higher above the hut potentially to bivvy up there. Okay. But we went from the hut and did the big long 1,000 meter haul up to the base of the route.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, there's a question coming in from Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, this one's for Becky as well. The question of going as a threesome. Did you have 1 leader and then 2 moving simultaneously behind her? Or how did you actually manage your threesome? Was it really only 1 at a time, which must have been what the Hut Guardian was against? Tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, so I guess this is one of the things with all women's teams, actually. There is a big advantage for us going as a 3 sometimes to split all the gear and actually have a lighter load per person. So that's quite an advantage, but it does mean that you have to be a lot more efficient with the rope work, the changeovers, and moving together. And that was the one thing we practiced. And actually, we very rarely for me, we employed a guide to go through getting really efficient as moving together as a 3. So yeah, we had our setup that we'd worked out before going was to have 1 person leading and then 2 of us spaced on the other end. And then sometimes that lead person, if we were going to move together, taking coils. And on the steeper stuff, we could also use a micro traction that was really good for moving together on occasions as well. So yeah, it does definitely need more practice as a 3 and more efficiency. But there are some advantages there, yeah, without a doubt.
Thank you. So, Roland, are you there, Roland?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Just a sort of comment really on thinking about an ascent we made at Monte Rosa. Must be 43 years ago when the glacier was rather different with Nicola. I think she has a little reminiscence to say about this.
Yes, I was just going to say, extraordinary, the recession of the glacier there, which we often look down when we're walking in Zermatt, but it was really rather fun. We were just married in 78 and we walked from the campsite in Zermatt with these huge sacks all the way up. We couldn't afford to stay in the old hut. Of course, it was the old hut then. So we slept under a big boulder that you can still see on the ridge. And I just remember in the morning, beautiful starlit night, and seeing the lights coming out of the hut about an hour below us. So we had the whole ascent to ourselves, which was lovely. And of course, we were more or less straight onto the snow from the bivouac. We left our bivvy stuff under the boulder and went straight up to the summit, and glorious views from the top. So just lovely memories, really. And then we walked all the way down, picked up our stuff from under the boulder, walked back up that path that Paul was talking about to the railway track, but we couldn't afford the railway, so we then walked all the way down again. And I have to say, I was so exhausted by the time we got back. But then about 10 years ago, we bumped into James Hart Dyke, and we love his alpine and mountain oil paintings. And we commissioned James to do a big oil painting, which we have in our hall, of the Dufourspitze. So just thought we'd share those memories, really. But mostly it illustrates the huge glacier loss. It's very sad, but it was all a bit easier in those days.
Is Neil there? There's a Neil.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
The question for Becky. It's just, I wondered whether you got the opportunity to go back to the hut and rub the Guardian's nose in it a little bit at any point, because that seems like it would have been a nice thing to do.
Well, yeah, we were back at the hut late that night, and then in the morning, he didn't seem that impressed. No, he said we'd missed dinner and that sort of thing.
That's a shame. That was it.
But in there, I guess it's. I did the Schreckhorn just up and down the normal route the year before an Alpine Club meet, and I certainly remember. I assume it's the same hut warden who was the most miserable hut warden I've ever met. I guess it's the same guy.
Yeah, apparently he's been there a long time. He has quite the reputation.
Yeah. We consider staying in the hut on the way down. I think my climbing partner, who I didn't know before, Boogie, hasn't forgiven me for making him walk down, but I just didn't want to stay in the hut another night because you were so miserable.
Thanks. Derek, did you have a question this time?
Yeah, I've actually got a question this time, Nick. It's not a comment. It's for Becky. Becky, you mentioned that when you were doing the ridge up to the Lauteraarhorn, that there was a helicopter rescuing a guide and his climb. Do you actually know why they were being rescued? Because it clearly wasn't a problem for you when you were going across.
Yeah, that's a good question, Derek. We actually never found out, but we don't think it was too serious because the helicopter dropped them back at the hut rather than whisking them away to immediate medical help. So, yeah, I don't think it was too serious in the end.
Perhaps they just didn't want to spend the night out.
Thanks. And Nick, are you there, Nick?
Hello, yes. Just a bit of information that I saw in the newsletter of the Basel section of the Swiss Alpine Club, who run the Schreckhorn hut. That Guardian has retired, and they have a new guy called Urban something, just so you all know.
That's good news.
Good. Well, it looks like that might be it, folks, in terms of questions. If anyone has a question, do chip in. Oh, there's one more coming in as I speak from Charles. Go ahead, Charles.
The question was about the Weisshorn. Many years ago, we did the normal traverse, if you like, the north ridge and then down the east ridge. and that means going over the Weisshorn, which incidentally is famous inside Switzerland as being the easiest 4,000 meter peak in Switzerland. But way back then, when we did it, we went to the Weisshorn hut, and there were 100 people in the hut. And before we went to bed at night, the Huttenwart in good German asked who was doing what, and there were two of us going to do the ridge, yeah, up and down, and all of the others were just going to the Weisshorn from the Trackway hut. So the Huttenwart then made everybody stand back and let us choose our sleeping places first of all, and got us up before everybody else. And then we did the traverse up the North Ridge and then down, and incidentally drove all the way home to where I live, near Basel, yeah, the same day. Was a normal weekend out, this was, yeah. But as I indicate, even on the North Ridge then, we were only two people. And I think you, Malcolm, mentioned that lots of people seem to have been up the normal route on the East Ridge. Do you have any idea how many people go to the summit of the Weisshorn nowadays, and by which route?
No, I mean, I assume would be lots of people going up the normal route. There's a hut there dedicated. The Weisshorn hut's only there for that route, really. And when we were there, it was glorious weather, so I would guess there'd been a hut full of people heading up. But because we were there so late, we didn't see any of them, which was really good.
Okay.
But
I think that might be it for questions. So it just remains for me to say thanks. Thanks so much to Becky, Max and Paul. Next week's Alpine Clubcast number 5 is a cracker entitled The Great Game. Tom Livingston and Ali Swinton are talking about the first ascent of the west face of Khoy-u-zom in Pakistan's Hindu Raj. So do join us for that. Thanks again to Nigel and Michael Delarue, who've worked really hard behind the scenes, helping us to get these Alpine Clubcasts out to you. And do have a look at the Alpine Club Library YouTube page, where you can watch and share all previous episodes.